2026 could very well be JP Crawford's last year in Seattle. We'll tell you what we expect from his potential send-off season, as well as Cole Young's second year in the majors and the competition to back up Cal Raleigh coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, February 19th, 2026. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patnode. We're two lifelong Mariners fans who've been covering the team for over half a decade, and today we're doing our middle infield and catcher preview for the 2026 season. We're going to talk about the upcoming years for JP Crawford, Cole Young, and Leo Rivas, as well as some of the catchers. That's not including Cal Raleigh, though. Cal's going to get his own special episode along with Julio that will wrap up our season preview series next week. So no Cal talk today. We're only going to be talking about the backup catchers, which was admittedly going to be a pretty uninteresting and straightforward conversation that we were going to save for the end of this episode, but we're actually going to start with it because things got a little bit more interesting, maybe not super interesting, but definitely a little bit more interesting with some news that came out last night. Mitch Garver is back. Merry Christmas, Mariners fans. Am I right? Garver is back on a minor league deal. He is supposed to report to camp actually today. I don't know if that's happened yet or not. Maybe it has by the time that you're watching this or listening to this. But Garver is back on a minor league deal. It does come with a little bit of a caveat. If he makes the opening day roster, he's actually going to get paid some money. He's going to get paid $2.25 million, which is pretty much twice the amount that Andrew Knizner got on his major league deal that he signed with the Mariners a couple of months ago. So at the very least, this is a hedge for Knizner. I'm really interested to see or to know like how this whole process went. Like if the Mariners thought that Garver was actually going to get paid more than he would wind up getting if he makes the opening day roster with them. And so they just moved on. They went with someone like Knizner, or maybe they just straight up just like Knizner more than Garver. I don't know. But at the very least, it's a hedge for Knizner, who obviously, doesn't have really any major league success in his past, though he has made some strides in terms of his pitch framing, and he made some tweaks offensively last year down in the minors. Maybe the Mariners think that they can get more out of him offensively, but there's a decent chance that Knizner is just a guy, and maybe the Mariners will wind up liking the idea of having Garver be their backup more than Knizner, especially because Garver is very familiar with this pitching staff, and some guys on this pitching staff like throwing to Garver specifically. Now, Garver, because he has 6 years of service time and he finished last season on a major league roster, he has a similar situation to Rowdy Tellez last year, where he can opt out of his minor league contract 5 days before opening day if he's not going to make the opening day roster. He can also do that on May 1st and then June 1st if he's down in the minors, down with the Rainiers, and he hears from his agent that maybe a team is willing to give him an opportunity at the major league level somewhere. So it's possible that he stays with the organization to start the season, but eventually down the road maybe chooses to go elsewhere if an opportunity isn't going to present itself in Seattle. So we'll see. But at the very least, there's an actual competition now at backup catcher. When we were doing our 26-man roster projection a couple of weeks ago, there were really only 3 roster spots that we talked about that were truly up for grabs. So now we seemingly have a 4th. So Garver versus Knizner, Colby, and I guess we'll also throw Johnny Pareda into the mix as well since he's on the 40-man roster. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's still Knizner. And I don't know how much of it is going to be financial because, $1 million isn't a lot. But remember, if they do choose Garver over Knizner, they still have to pay Knizner. So you're paying his $1 million, and now you're paying Garver $2.25 million. So all of a sudden you have $3.25 million, committed to your backup catcher. Whereas, a day ago you had $1 million. Now, does the extra $2.25 million mean much? I mean, to most teams, it shouldn't. And, to their credit, the ownership group, ate the $3 million that Leote was owed in the middle of last year and then still spent some money at the deadline. So, I'll give them that, but I still think that does factor into the decision a little bit. Like, whereas if it's close, we could just keep Knizner. If Garver has an opportunity to go elsewhere, we wish him luck. And I don't think you're going to see a significant drop off from Knizner to Garver offensively. I mean, Garver really wasn't that good. Pretty good against lefties, though, and that gives him an edge there. And also the fact that he knows the pitching staff very well. So there's not going to be that kind of, that learning curve for him. So look, it's not cut and dry, but I still think ultimately Knizner is the guy because they chose him over Garver already. And so unless he just, lays an egg, that being Knizner, I don't think the Mariners are going to want to pay him his $1 million and then pay Mitch Garver the $2.25 million that they would owe him, when there's probably not that big of a difference between Knizner and Garver offensively. Now, the nice thing about this competition is that they're both going to get plenty of opportunities because Cal's going to be gone for a couple weeks, we assume, unless Team USA is, their WBC run gets cut way shorter than anybody expects, but they're going to be gone. He's going to be gone for a couple of weeks. So early in camp, he'll play a lot. He'll play a lot of innings, but once he leaves in, about a week, it's going to be Garver and it's going to be Knizner, and they're going to probably catch, 4 or 5 innings apiece. And they're going to get as many at bats as they can get. And Knizner will have to see if there were some tweaks that he made in the minors. Are those real? Going to be tough to say in the Cactus League, but there are some things that you have to consider here. I do think that what's probably not up for debate is that Knizner is a better defensive catcher than Garver. And so Garver's really going to have to hit straight up. He's going to have to hit. But again, the one thing Garver does have going for him is that he knows the pitching staff very well. We know he works in that clubhouse. We know he works in those meetings and, in the room with the other pitchers. And obviously with Cal as well. So their familiarity is a big thing there. And there's also offensive upside. Like, is there a non-zero chance that, Garver is better than he was? Like, obviously he's not going to get back to 2023, but like, could he get closer to that than he has been the last 2 years? And then at that point, does he also factor into the DH mix, which makes it more appealing to carry him as the backup catcher? Whereas Knizner is a guy you're never going to want to DH. Maybe. So there's a path. There is definitely a path for Garver. But I think ultimately the Mariners have kind of made their decision. We want the backup catcher to be more about defense, and we want that to be a cheaper position for us. So if we pick Garver over Knizner, it's a $3.25 million investment, and not a $1 million investment. But if Garver hits enough, if they like what they see enough in the bat to think like, hey, this guy could also help us in the DH spot like he did last year. He could play more than, backup catcher for 50, 60 games, then he might have a shot. The Mariners might just swallow the extra $1 million. So we'll see how it goes. But ultimately, I still think it's Knizner because I don't believe the bat is going to be significant enough that the Mariners are going to want to pay $3 million for their backup catcher instead of $1 million. And plus, again, you lose Knizner when you DFA him. It's possible he clears, but probably not. And Garver, if he doesn't have a good enough spring to beat Knizner, then he's probably not going to get claimed, or he's probably not going to get a major league offer. He didn't all winter, and you might be able to keep him in the minors. Is 35-year-old Mitch Garver with the World Series ring and Money in the Bank going to want to, toil around in AAA? Maybe not, but maybe he does. I think I would just take that shot. And by the way, Pareda might be better than both of them. He just has an option left, and because he has an option left, you could just stick him in Tacoma. He can't say no, and you have quality backup catcher depth right there in Tacoma. So
right, and that's another part of the Garver. That's another part of the Garver thing too. Is like Garver's going to be splitting time with Pareda down there. Like, how much is he going to want to do that? Right, like if he's not going to get plenty of opportunity to like showcase, to other teams that might be willing to give him a call, by that May 1st or June 1st deadline. Like, yeah, so it's all pretty interesting, but this would be the year though that Garver gets back on track offensively, right? Like, gets paid $12 million a year for the last 2 years. Nah. But as soon as he signs a minor league deal, yeah.
Maybe. I mean, like, look, again, if this is a guy that you think you can see giving, 30 DH days to, in addition to the 50, 60 games he's going to be asked to catch, then it's worth the money. And you give him that shot. I don't know how you prove that in the Cactus League, but, you kind of have to trust the Mariners' thoughts on this. And the Mariners, to their credit, we talk a lot about their pitching development. It's very good. They've also had a good eye for catchers, over obviously Cal's the big one, but again, Harry Ford, they were able to turn into a top 100 prospect. You look at what they did with Tom Murphy and Austin Nola and Omar Narvaez and what they were able to turn those guys into. So they have a pretty good eye when it comes to catchers. And so I guess I'll trust them with what decision they make here. But ultimately, I don't think you can see enough from the bat of Garver to justify spending more money to downgrade defensively at a position that I'm hoping only plays, 60 games a year.
Well, and also from the DH perspective, like what opportunities is he actually going to get to DH? Even if he does show you some stuff, because it's Rough Snyder, it's Canzone, it's Rayleigh, it's, Randy, some days it might be Cal, some days it might be, Julio, some days, et cetera. Like there's going to be a lot of guys that rotate through that DH spot already that I'm just not sure, like, even if Garver shows you some stuff this spring offensively, that he would even, if it even would ever make sense for him to DH. Just given all the other options that you have. So I don't know, but look, like I said a few months ago, like obviously Mitch Garver, you hear that name, you cringe because like you were paying him $12 million a year for the last few years. He was supposed to be a middle of the order bat for you. And he wasn't even close to that. Like he wasn't, he was hardly a league average bat this past year. Right. But Mitch Garver at like $3 million to be a backup catcher. That's fine. Mitch Garver on a minor league deal and eventually potentially making, $2.25 million. That's even better. Like Garver is a fine backup catcher. He's not the best backup catcher, but he's a fine backup catcher.
Like I said, the pitching staff likes him. They trust him. He can hit a little bit against lefties. He's got some pop. That's totally fine. Again, there are no such thing as a bad minor league deal, and this is a deal that makes sense for the Mariners. It's a deal that makes a lot of sense for Garver as well, and we'll just kind of see what happens. But it does add a little bit of intrigue to the backup catcher competition. I'm still not convinced that Pareda isn't just the best of all three of them, just because he's got a really good arm and he blocks and he gets on base, and he's shown more at the major league level offensively than, which isn't a lot, but more than Knizner. But he has an option, so that's going to hurt him because why put him on the opening day roster when you just put him in Tacoma and get one of these two guys who doesn't have an option and you put them on the opening day roster. So Paredes the dark horse here. I just think that, the roster math is working against him too much here. So I think it'll be Knizner, but I can't sit here and say Garver has no shot of making the team. I think he has a good chance of making the team. I would say it's probably, if I want to handicap it right now, I would probably say Knizner's at 50, Garver's at like 40%, Paredes at like 10% to win this opening day job.
All right, we will get into our middle infield portion of today's preview in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel and the Space Needle. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? Then I have great news for you. FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. All you have to do is use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. I'm talking flights, tickets, the whole experience. So if you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in, because now not only can you pick cash, but it can also send you to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Pie to Pie at the Space Needle is the perfect pregame or pre-funk spot before hitting Climate Pledge Arena. After 4 p.m., the Space Needle's Pie to Pie gives you the whole package. Entry, a sweeter savory tip-top pie, and a pint of beer, wine, or a non-alcoholic drink, all for just $35 per person. Minimum purchase of 2 required. Pie to Pie is your launch pad to Kraken, Torrent, and Storm games, as well as so many other great events at the CPA. So why not enjoy a little space and a great view while pre-gaming with your favorite cocktail rather than trying to cram into a crowded sports bar? Toast the home team, then roll into Climate Pledge with the best pregame story in all of Seattle. Whether it's date night, friend night, or you're just here for the deal of it all, come take your place on the horizon for only $35 per person. Limited time offer, 21 plus only, ID required. Get tickets at spaceneedle.com. Minimum 2 required. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen for all things Mariners. And also thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Baseball is back, and you can lock in by joining the Everydayer Club, which gets you ad-free episodes and access to our group chat on Discord. For the next week or so, you can use the promo code SPRING, that's SPRING, for a free month. Go to lockedonmariners.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, so let's get back into our season preview here. We're now in the middle infield portion after talking about the backup catcher situation. We'll start with JP Crawford. At the top of the show, I said that this could very well be JP's last season in Seattle. He's in the final year of that contract extension that he signed back in 2022 on opening day. And this could be the final chapter of potentially a Mariners Hall of Fame career for JP Crawford. Last year when we did this same preview, we asked of JP Crawford, can you find some middle ground between what was your worst year in 2024 and your career best year in 2023 from an offensive standpoint? And he quite literally did that. 2023, he put up a 136 WRC plus. 2024, he put up a 90 WRC plus. In 2025, he put up a 113 WRC plus. That is quite literally the middle ground between 90 and 136. So it's pretty funny how that worked out. Obviously, you know the deal with the defense. It's been a problem for a little while. He still has the occasional highlight play in his bag, but the range is a bit of an issue and all that. We've talked about that for some time. But JP's ultimate role on this club is to be the page turner in that 9-hole, right? Get it back to Brendan Donovan, get it back to Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez. Like we said on yesterday's episode when we were talking about Donovan, like JP and Donovan are going to be critical to the Mariners' offensive success this year because it is up to them to consistently set the table for Cal and for Julio this year. So contract year JP Crawford, Colby. Mm-hmm. What are your expectations?
I think what he did last year is a totally fair expectation. 110 WRC plus, be the table setter for the top of the lineup. And, in some instances, maybe be a leadoff hitter when the situation calls for it. So I think that's really, fair to expect from JP. I don't think we're ever going to see 136 WRC plus again, but hey, if we do, then the Mariners probably win the World Series. So assuming everybody else is healthy. But JP, we know who he is. He's got some pop. He'll pull some home runs, probably come up with a bunch of, really clutch hits. That's kind of what he does. But a majority of his at-bats will end in, kind of inside out swing, flare singles into left field. And that's what JP does. And he'll draw walks. He'll work counts. He'll, be a liability at times at shortstop, but for the most part, he'll make the routine play, 98% of the time. So this is who JP is. It's who he's been for the last few years now. And it does feel like we've kind of established a floor and a ceiling, and now anything in between is about what you would expect. So I think 110 WRC plus JP is really good, and it's exactly what you need. And we talk a lot about the Mariners 1 through 5. And how good it is. Well, JP's not hitting 6th, but he's hitting 9th. We assume he's hitting 9th. So it's like a 9 through 5 in kind of a weird baseball lineup way. That's
Right.
legitimate and good. And it has a lot of, a lot of guys who draw walks, a lot of guys who don't strike out in it. I mean, you're stacking, in some order in those 1 through 5 or 9 through 5, you're stacking, Brendan Donovan, JP, and Josh Naylor, 3 guys who just don't really strike out and they make a lot of contact. Then obviously you've got big time power in Cal and Julio, and then Randy's kind of a mix where he's got power, certainly good power, but also draws more walks than Julio and all that. So yeah, JP's kind of a table setter. Again, he might hit leadoff a little bit this year. There's just going to be days where it makes sense to get him up there. And, maybe if he's riding a hot streak, you try and push him up there a little bit too. But for the most part, he's going to be the 9-hitter, and that's a great spot for him to be. Very few teams in baseball are going to have a 9-hitter as good as JP Crawford. And I feel pretty confident that JP is going to have a rock solid year. And, it'll lead to him getting a nice little contract, unfortunately, somewhere besides Seattle, which is just kind of part of the business. It's hard to say goodbye, but this is going to be it for JP in Seattle. Feels very likely, and I think he's going to go out with a solid season. So I think future Mariners Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And if you don't think so, you're wrong. But we'll see how it goes for him. But ultimately, I'm pretty confident JP is going to have a nice year.
So Cole Young had a very interesting rookie year, Colby.
Mm-hmm.
For the first half of it was pretty good. He was a slightly above league average hitter. The defense was very poor, surprisingly. But he was dealing with a shoulder thing in spring. Have to wonder, how much that kind of lingered into the regular season. Or it was a shoulder elbow thing. I forget exactly what it was, but he was dealing with an arm issue. So I wonder how, if maybe that lingered into the regular season and that impacted the defense. But he graded out very poorly defensively, and that was just the complete opposite of what we had heard about Cole Young coming up through the organization. But offensively, he was impressive at times. But then August 15th rolls around. He has a 3-hit game against the Mets. And from that point forward, he collects 3 more hits for the rest of the regular season. And that was not without, some opportunity as well. But eventually the Mariners just deemed like, we can't play this guy anymore. And so Leo Rivas got more opportunities, et cetera. And we'll talk about Rivas in a little bit. But, going into camp right now, Cole Young is at least written in pencil as the opening day second baseman. He might be in a camp battle with Colt Emerson for a roster spot, maybe not for the same position, but for the same roster spot. It's possible Emerson makes the club over him, and Emerson's the third baseman and Donovan goes over to second. But what are your expectations for Cole Young in year 2, who, again, he showed glimpses that he can hang. And we talked about this, when he was doing that, we were like, Cole Young's going to be a very good major leaguer. So do you think that begins now? Do you think he maybe starts to put it all together, or at least a little bit of it together this year, or you have some concerns still?
I think I'm, relatively bullish on Cole Young. He came into camp this year, and the early report is that he looks good. Like, physically, he looks a little more mature. A lot of things along the lines of, like, he lost some of the baby fat or whatever, and he's just a little slimmer, a little more explosive, which will or could in theory help with the range at second base. He's made I believe, was it Joe or was it Ben had mentioned that he's made a slight mechanical change in his swing. So it's a little less of a hitch in there, so it might help him get to the high fastball more. So it really looks like he put in the work this winter. And the Mariners right now, they like Cole Young very clearly, and I think because he's been a major leaguer and because he's had some success at the big league level for a not insignificant amount of time, that it's going to be very hard for Emerson to supplant him and win a job on the opening day roster. But I like Cole Young. I have for a while. He's just, for as cliche as it is, he's a ball player. He's going to go gap to gap. He's going to go line to line. He runs the bases pretty well. We know he's a better defender than he showed last year. He's probably not going to win any Gold Gloves, but he's a guy who could play legitimate shortstop. And honestly, he's probably was a better defender at shortstop than he was at second. So with the reps and kind of the new recommitment in the offseason and all that, I think he'll be solid defensively. And I really think this is a future 270, 280, 350 guy, and then we'll see where the power ends up. But we saw last year he's got some big boy power when he really reaches it. So maybe he's the guy who only hits 15, but all 15 of the home runs are like 430 feet bombs. But he's got more pop than even I thought. So I won't rule out 20 home runs for him. It still feels like there's a real shot this guy could be a 4-win second baseman. And I don't know if that starts this year. He's still only 22 years old, but I think I'm relatively bullish on him. I like the player. I like the profile, and I think he's going to hit. So I'm pretty confident in Cole Young, and I think he will win the job out of spring training. And as for what that does to Colt, I don't know, but I think Cole right now, if I was projecting ahead right now, Cole's going to be the opening day second baseman. And I think he's going to have a nice spring to really get people, kind of back on the bandwagon.
All right, we will talk about Leo Rivas and some of the other guys that could appear in the middle infield for the Mariners in 2026 in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring. Do it the right way with Indeed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone. And on there, we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. So, Leo Rivas, what have you done? You had a really good year in 2025. 244, 387, 333, the slash line. That's a 121 WRC plus. He was worth 0.8 F4. He was a real pain in the you-know-what at the plate, as our good friend Ben Ranieri loves to call him. 18% walk rate for Rivas in 2025. And of course, he was at the center of some of the biggest moments of the entire season for the Mariners. His walk-off against the Cardinals, and of course, who could forget that double to knot things up at 2 apiece against the Tigers in Game 5 of the ALDS. His defining moment of his career so far, on his birthday, no less. The only frustrating part of Rivas's 2025 season is that he wasn't on the club longer than he actually was. He was a real contributor for this club in the early portion of the season. And then he gets sent down in late May or early June. I forget exactly when it was. And then we don't hear from him again until September when rosters expand. And again, as I said, he goes on to have some of the biggest moments of that entire stretch for the Mariners. So now entering camp, Rivas seems to be the guy, seems to be the 13th man in that position player group. He's going to be the utility man for the Mariners. We've talked about them potentially going outside the organization, adding someone like Ramon Arias. I know you're a big fan of that idea. We've also talked about how, if they want to have both Colt Emerson and Cole Young on the roster on opening day, that Rivas might be the guy that gets the axe in order for them to do that. But in general, right now, it seems like Rivas is going to make the opening day roster. He's going to be the utility man for this club. And, he earned it. He absolutely earned it. And it doesn't really seem like he has much competition for that spot right now. That might change, and we'll get to this in a little bit. That might change towards the summer, but right now, seems like Rivas is going to be the guy. So what are your expectations for Rivas going into this season?
It's tough to say. We don't have, like a vast amount of sample size here. We know that he, makes contact, a fair amount of contact. We know that he works counts. We know that he can certainly play multiple spots. Like, it's a useful bench piece, but in terms of like, is it somebody who you feel great about, just giving the true Dylan Moore role to? I don't know. We know Rivas doesn't have much experience in the outfield. He did get some in the outfield last year though. So overall on Rivas, this is, I like the player fine. I like him a lot more if he's in AAA and I could just call him up when I need him, which is why I still like the Ramon Urias idea. But yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of power. I know he hit some, home runs last year, a couple, but it really is just kind of a slap the ball around the ballpark. He's not an elite base stealer, but he can definitely steal some bags. So yeah, it just doesn't really have one standout tool. He just kind of has a bunch of like fringe average tools, which obviously is, part of the reason why he's a bench player. So I think the best way to, kind of phrase where I stand on Leo Rivas is to say that I'm a fan of Urias. I think that is an upgrade over Rivas, and it's one that the Mariners should consider looking at. But I would say that, like, if the Mariners are going to tell me that we think Rivas is, about as good as Urias, and Urias wants, $3.5 million and Rivas is league minimum, we would rather just roll with Rivas. Like, I could buy that. I don't think I would agree with him, but I could buy it because I think Leo has shown enough in his limited sample size to say, like, yeah, this guy can help me off the bench in a couple different ways. So I'm fine with it. I don't really have a ton of faith in him. There's not a ton of great utility options, in the minors waiting to go if he fails. And, if, Donovan gets hurt or cool, you have Emerson, but what if Donovan gets hurt or JP gets hurt, Emerson gets called up, and then Cole Young stinks or whatever, he needs to go back down to the minors. Now, it'd be nice to have a veteran who's played every day to fill that role, but Leo, we'll see what he can do. I like the player enough that I'm willing to give him a shot. I just don't trust him, which, is just more about the lack of the sample size more so than anything else.
So behind Rivas, there's, a few other potential names who can make an appearance in the middle infield for the Mariners in 2026. I don't think one of those names is going to be Miles Mastrobuoni, though. At the very least, with how things are currently situated, because Mastrobuoni is out of minor league options. So he'd have to, clear and be able to revert back to AAA and all that. So maybe at that point, if that happens and they're able to stash him in Tacoma, then sure, he becomes part of this. And we know that they like Mastrobuoni. It's just there really is no path for him to make the roster. And plus, he's another left-handed hitting infielder. Obviously you can play some corner outfield as well, but there just really isn't. I mean, look at all the left-handed hitting outfielders that they have as well, with Rayleigh and Canzone. So there isn't a fit for Mastrobuoni right now. But maybe he gets involved in this mix. But I'm more so talking about Ryan Bliss, Will Wilson, Brock Rodden. Who interests you out of that group, if anyone?
None of them really. Will Wilson is a former first-round pick who's got a small cup of coffee with the Guardians, I believe, last year. Did not go well, and he really hasn't performed all that well in the minors, if memory serves. Ryan Bliss I like, but he's not really a utility type. He can only play second. He doesn't have the arm for second or for short or third, not really anyways, and certainly not for left or for right field, maybe left field, but he's never taken fly balls.
Yeah.
And he also hasn't played in like a year and a half.
Yeah, that's the big part, right? So he gets hurt in early April last year. We've talked about this because we've been asked about Ryan Bliss a ton, both here and on the Patreon. He gets hurt in early April. He comes back in September, trying to make his way back, and then he gets hurt again after playing like 6 games. I don't even really know where he's at health-wise right now. I don't know if there's been any reports about him in spring, and I've just missed them, but I haven't seen anything personally. So I don't know where he is health-wise right now. I don't know if he would be ready to go for opening day anyway, but he just needs to get his baseball legs back under him, like literally and figuratively. Like he has to get his baseball legs back under him. So, I've said this before, like, let him go down to AAA, let him play, and then in a couple months' time, if things are starting to look good, then we'll reassess. And if there's an opportunity for him to get some action at the major league level, then sure, because I do like Ryan Bliss, and I do think that he could be a helpful big leaguer. But right now, there's just really no path to him making the roster in general, and specifically right now, I want to prioritize his health and him, getting to be the best version of himself and get the amount of opportunities that he really needs to have right now. Like he needs playing time, and like you're not going to give him that at the major league level right now. Like even if he made the club, he's playing once, maybe twice a week for you. Like he needs consistent reps, especially as he works his way back from his injury. So Bliss really isn't a factor for me until late May. Like I'm not even like willing to have the conversation about him until around then. And then Brock Rodden, we talked about this during our prospects rankings. Like he's hit at every level. He's actually shown some sneaky pop, especially from the left side. He plays pretty good defense. He was the minor league Gold Glove winner at second base a couple of years ago. He just strikes out a lot, so, and that number typically doesn't go down the higher in baseball you get. So he's got to cut down the swing and miss, specifically on pitches inside the strike zone, specifically against velo. But Rodden is definitely someone that I could see, getting into the mix here with Rivas sometime in the summer for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the strikeouts last year were nuts. I mean, it's not sustainable for a guy to strike out that much in Double-A at 26 years old. I believe Brock Rodden 25, 20. Yeah. 25. Like still that's pretty hefty number. Those don't typically go down. And oh, by the way, he also barely played last year. So it's kind of the same thing as the Ryan Bliss issue, which is why he wouldn't be a factor until the summer, like you said anyways. But I don't love the other options here if somebody goes down, and not a lot of teams have depth at the middle infield spot, and the fact that the Mariners have 2 viable major league shortstops and 2 viable major league second basemen already, and they're all either going to be on the opening day roster or they're all going to be very close to being on the opening day roster. The Mariners have good depth at that position. It's just that like if 2 of those guys go down, which I know unlikely, things might get ugly, but that's true of pretty much every team. Like most teams can't sustain both their starting shortstop and their starting second baseman, going down with an injury. So you do what you can. And while you feel better about like, I guess Patrick Wisdom and the Connor Joe, like the corner infield options, although Connor Joe is really only a first baseman, not a third baseman. Yeah. Like I guess I feel a little bit better about them, but there's certainly more upside with the middle infield options because they're not, I don't want to say failed major leaguers, but I mean, they're not here on minor league deals. So
they're not 33, 34 years old like Patrick Wisdom and Connor Joe are.
Right. So there's still some potential upside to tap. Like I wish Ryan Bliss had a little bit of a better arm. If Ryan Bliss had a 50 grade arm, then I could see him actually factoring into the utility spot. But right now he's just purely a second baseman. The Mariners have not asked him to play the outfield, which right now they shouldn't. They should focus on him hitting and getting reps and getting comfortable. So I'm not blaming them for that. But Bliss would probably be like the next guy up of the trio or the group of the potential replacements, quote unquote, for Leo Rivas should he get hurt, what have you.
All right, well, that is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And once again, if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. For Colby Patnode, I'm Tidy Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tidy Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.